and then we'll get started. Can everyone at the back hear? Okay. Louder? Is that better? Okay, firstly, my name is Carrie Murphy. I was in a previous life Jeremy Corbyn's Chief of Staff. That's very kind. I was about to move on very quickly to thank you, the people of Liverpool, for all the fantastic support that you gave us through what was a very difficult period. And although it wasn't entirely a success, I want to give you the commitment that when we go again, we will absolutely do much better the next time. So thank you very much for all the support. And more importantly, thanks so much for coming along tonight to support the poetry event that has been sponsored by the Peace and Justice Project, which is Jeremy Corbyn's new project. There's lots of materials on the tables. If you're not a member, please join up and support us. There's also raffle tickets going around, which hopefully you can buy for £1 a strip. A couple of prizes at the front, a lovely photograph of Len McCluskey and Jeremy Corbyn. There's some Havana Club rum. And there's also some signed copies of Always Red. Jeremy signed them and Len signed them as well. So I'm not about to participate in any way in this event, but I do want to introduce you, and it's a privilege to introduce you to Melissa Benn, who, as you will probably know, is Tony Benn's daughter. So we are absolutely thrilled to have Melissa here to talk about.
That's who I am. A few other things as well, but very proud to be Tony Benn's daughter. Can you all hear me? Yeah. And actually, before we start on this event, which it is my job to manage, and believe you me, piles of books. It's like a kind of war of the homeworks. I think at the moment Jeremy's doing slightly better. But I just wanted to say that my dad loved Liverpool, and I think Liverpool loved him. And he always said that Liverpool was the most political city. I think he probably was excluding Scotland, but anyway, the most political city in the UK. And he said it was the most intellectual, the most witty, you got the best debate. And he said at one point he wished he'd represented Liverpool. And that would have been great, but he represented two other places. One of the best stories he told was about, which illustrated Liverpool friendliness, was he talked about how once he was, I think, got off the train and got lost, which was not unusual, couldn't find his hotel. And he went up to somebody and he said, "Can you help me?" And he said, this incredibly kind man not only took me 10 minutes to my hotel, but gave me a lecture on Rosa Luxemburg, the radical activist, all the way there. And then my dad said, I think probably in his diary or somewhere, he said, "How kind to do that to a complete stranger." And I thought, you know what? I think he probably knew who you were. Because would you tell anybody who was showing to a hotel the story of Rosa Luxemburg? I don't know. Anyway, so here we are. I'm not quite sure why Jeremy asked me to do this, but I am very honoured. I have known Jeremy since I was a teenager. He's a little bit older than I am. And I did say to him in the taxi, do not tell any stories about me as a grumpy teenager, because he was always coming to the house for meetings. And I don't know if you did much poetry reading in those days, but you were always at the house for campaign group meetings. And I think the last time I saw you, Len, was when I brought my quite frail dad to Tony Benn House in Bristol, and Dad opened it and you were there. And there's one thing I remember there's a giant picture of my dad that goes up the whole of the wall, and I've got a picture of me standing there putting my hand in his ear. It's my favourite picture. Anyway, enough of that. So what we're going to do this evening is really, we're just going to hear from Jeremy and Len about sort of the evolving of your political life, which we know a bit about, but also the role that poetry has played in it, how it's reinforced moments or given you comfort or inspired you. Now, as I say, Jeremy's list is quite terrifying. There's an awful lot of poems on there, but you did say that some poems you won't read the whole poem, will you? Because I'm there to. Sorry, this is sounding a bit negative, but I've just got to hold the ring here. And so let's start.
It's the ref laying down the rules.
Yeah. So let's start. I get to be a bit sort of desert island poems here, which is, let me ask you, Jeremy, when you first, when did poetry first mean something to you? Because you were quite active as a radical early on, weren't you?
Yeah, I've always been active in all my life in lots of things, and always active in peace movement, industrial movement, and so on. But before I say anything, can I just say a huge thank you to the CASA for hosting us tonight. What a fantastic and the history of the CASA is, of course, it came out of the dock strike, it came out of the great work Ken Loach did in support. That's why it exists, so please support the CASA. And also, we've got Len's book here tonight. We've also got another book here written by a great friend of ours, Steve Howell, which is called Collateral Damage. I won't say any more than that, except it's here, and it is about a spy cop infiltrating a peace group. It's a good read. It'll make you angry at the end, but that's a good thing.
So if there's any spy cops here at the moment.
Any infiltrators, please put your hand up. And so, yeah, poetry to me has always been fantastic, because poets can talk a truth that it's harder to say in a speech or a written article or something like that, because it goes slightly a flight of the mind, but tells some amazing truths in the middle of it. And that's what I love about poetry. It can also take you into other places, give you an idea of beauty, an idea of sadness, of tragedy, of success, of failure. And I have quite a lot of poetry books at home. I understand Len has even more that are too heavy for him to carry. So he just brought a few along this evening. I enjoy reading poetry, and I get sent a great deal of poetry by people that write. And that's why I was very keen to put into our manifestos the idea of a pupil arts premium, because in every child there is imagination, in every child there is poetry. And if you read the poetry of young children, I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8, up to sort of 10, 11, it's amazing stuff, because they say it as they see it, they say it as they believe it, and they have no compunction about what it is. And sadly, later on, they become slightly embarrassed about it. I'm sorry, I do write poetry, but I don't show it to anybody. Well, I wanted us to have this pupil arts premium so that every child got access to music, every child got access to poetry, access to acting, access to arts, because it helps their imagination, it helps their empowerment, and also at a strictly educational level, helps their maths, helps their English, helps their science and everything else. So it is about unlocking the imagination in others. And so the more I've got towards today's event, the more I've kind of regretted that Len and I got into the discussion about having it in the first place. Because you think about it, there's so many poems that both of us could quote forever. And we're not apparently allowed to read the whole poem because you give us the rules on it.
Well, unless it's a very short poem.
Unless it's only 4 lines, okay. And so I've got lots of poems, some of which you'll have heard of, and some of which you won't. And I think you wanted us to quote one at the beginning, did you?
Well, sorry.
Just a bit of one, anyway.
Yeah,
Is that
I
right?
think the idea was that I think you were asked, but you don't have to do your homework, to do a poem on social justice, a poem on something more personal, a poem on something to do with anti-racist or struggles like that. Yeah. So I think maybe if you, but I think pick one. Just
I'll
read
quote
us
a little
one.
bit of one now. You probably won't have heard of the poet, and it's by a poet called Mike Jenkins. It's called The Tree Council. I won't read it all because it's quite long. I'll just read the first and last verses of it. The Tree Council is set in Tolpuddle in 1832. The Tolpuddle martyrs swore their allegiance under the tree, ended up in the assize courts, ended up being deported to Australia. Some ended up coming back, and they were basically the foundation of our trade union movement in its modern terms. So the first verse says, "Under the sycamore's shade, our secret council gathered, whispers joining the breeze. We knew gentle blades would fly, just as others spread and grew in the many places of the desperate." And then it ends up. "I spoke up. My brothers agreed. Each plan was a win. To carry and plant those seeds." Brilliant poem. I'm just describing the bravery and the honesty.
Okay, city of Liverpool. I never ever die. I've quoted this many times, including in my book, that, in my opinion, Jeremy Corbyn changed British politics forever and changed the Labour Party forever, because people now know what the difference is between the blandness that went before and what Jeremy stood for. The Labour Party was created in order to challenge the establishment, and that's why the establishment hated them, because suddenly they had a leader of the Labour Party who inspired hundreds of thousands of young people. And it's wonderful to see you here tonight to kind of get involved in politics. So it's fabulous to share this platform. And to Melissa, Tony Benn was my political hero. He's the reason I joined the Labour Party in 1970. I lived in Wigan then, and I heard Tony speak, and I was spellbound. And little did I know as a young person then that he would become a friend of mine. Wonderful, wonderful man with not an ounce of malice in him. That's why him and Jeremy are so alike. There's not an ounce of malice in this man. I can't say the same about myself. There's quite a few of those bastards that I've got. It is a privilege to share this platform with Melissa, and it takes me back to that wonderful, wonderful man who I spoke to many times, including in the latter years, but he was still as sharp as a pin. So it's great to be here, great to be back. Now, Melissa's asked a question about poetry and politics. How does poetry affect your politics, or was politics from first? It's difficult for me to say. I'm a child of the 60s, and when I was 16 and 17, revolution was in the air. Here in Liverpool, everything was changing, not just the music. We were the heartbeat of the music world, I suppose. Long hair, and I did have long hair. Drugs, and I'll say no more about that in case there aren't any spy cops. But of course, there was the Black civil rights movements in America. There was the Catholic civil rights movement in Northern Ireland, which was very close to people here in a Catholic city like Liverpool. And of course, there was Vietnam. And so what there was also was the music of Bob Dylan, of Paul Simon. These were protest songs. And in essence, they were poetry put to motion, put to music. And that's really because my love of poetry, and I'm no expert on poetry, when I see what Jeremy's brought, I'm thinking, my God, I've been sold a pup here. I was only supposed to do a couple of poems. Jeremy's got about 403 there. And I've just explained to him that Liverpool kick off at 8 o'clock. So, you know, the point is, my love of poetry came later in life, and that's because in working class communities, when I was growing up in my community, in my house, poetry was never talked about. Poetry, you must be joking. In fact, it was considered a little bit, effeminate if anybody was engaged in poetry. And poetry was never taught us at school in my working class experience, which was an outrage because the middle and certainly the ruling classes were taught poetry all the time. And so when I did discover poetry in my 20s, I was a bit angry because there's no doubt in my mind that poetry should be statutory on the national curriculum, because the truth, every class, including working class people, understand what poetry is, because we teach our babies nursery rhymes. That's what poetry is. Why do we always talk about nursery rhymes to young kids growing up? It's to engage them. It's so that they can hear words and engage in it. And that should go right through our schooling, and it doesn't. And so I'm part of arguing that the school curriculum for all children, working class children, should be including poetry. And Jeremy, had he have got into number 10 Downing Street, and he nearly did, he took us within that much of power. If it hadn't been for the slimy, treacherous stakes that were in the PLP, knifing him in the back, he'd have got there. So very quickly, as I say, Vietnam, anti-war, the protest songs of Dylan and Paul Simon. And one of Paul Simon's songs, a little known song, is called On the Side of a Hill. And it talks about on the side of a hill, a little cloud weeps and waters the grave with its silent tear. And it's the grave of a little 7-year-old who's been killed in war. And there's a line in it that says, down the war rages on, and generals order their men to kill and to fight for a cause they've long ago forgotten. It's a beautiful, beautiful song, but the actual poem that I'm going to read for you, Melissa, if I can open this up quickly, is and that's not the one.
Oh, yeah.
It actually is the, if you just hold that up, try to kind of find everything. It's for me the best anti-war film that I've ever read, and that is Wilfred Owen's Dulce et Decorum Est. And Wilfred Owen, of course, was killed in the First World War. He was 25 years of age, and he was killed a week before armistice. And this, for me, is the greatest anti-war poem I've ever read. So just bear with me. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or wine. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the crud, of vile incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory. They all lie. Dulce et decorum est, pro patria more. And colleagues, just very, very quickly on that, for those of you that are not up to date with your Latin, and I'll be checking with the young ones just lately, but Dulce et decorum est pro patria more means it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. And it's actually inscribed on the Royal Military College at Sandhurst. And that's why Wilfred Owen called it the old lie.
Yeah. So thanks for translating. Len, for someone who said they haven't prepared, I thought that was really good. So, and we've gone from the 12 Pole Masters to the First World War. So, Jeremy, where are you going to take us next? Yeah, it's just worked out that way.
Well, there's lots of places I could take you to, but I thought this might be a good idea to go to Mexico now.
Viva!
Viva Mexico! As you know, my wife Laura is Mexican and she's here tonight, and I want to say a big thank you to her for all the crap she's ever put up with the past 5 years. And she has a particular interest in a woman I doubt anybody in this room has heard of, called Sor Inés de la Cruz. Sor Inés de la Cruz was born in 1651, died in 1695. She was an indigenous, now Mexican woman who learned Spanish and was ended up as a translator for the Spanish towards indigenous languages because they were occupying the country in the most brutal possible way. She taught herself to read and write, and she wrote a great deal, and she wrote poetry and many other things. The hierarchy of the Catholic Church, didn't like women who could speak several languages, even other languages, and they certainly didn't like a woman who was going to be writing anything. And so most of her prodigious works were sadly burnt by Archbishop. It's quite appalling, but some of them survived. She was somebody that believed absolutely in women's rights. Now, this is 17th century colonial Mexico. Women didn't have too many rights or too many opportunities. And so one poem that survived, and I'll read it, it's quite short, called You Foolish Men. Well, I haven't started yet. We no card votes and all the kind of and it's called You Foolish Men. You foolish men who lay the guilt on women, not seeing you're the cause of the very thing you blame. If you invite their disdain with measureless desire, why wish they well behave if you incite to ill? You fight this when it was your guile. In all you crazy shows, you act just like a child of state. If they ask you, to treat you like use. It's a description of what the men were like in treating her at that time.
That could be written yesterday. Okay, so Len.
I've got a bet with one of my comrades in the room, Kevin Robinson, and we were talking about which one of us, Jeremy or I, would kind of mention Shelley first. So I thought I'd just get it in there. Actually, it is something that if you haven't read, you should read. He wrote it after the Peterloo massacre in 1809, and the film is brilliant, by the way, by Mike Leigh. If you haven't seen it, go and see it. My favourite actress is in it, Maxine Peake. In fact, Maxine sent me a Valentine once, so one of those on my mobile, a kind of a video, so I'm very close to keeping hold of that. But of course, in the Mask of Anarchy is the line, "Rise like lions out of slumber and vanquish your number," which of course Jeremy and I have quoted a million times. So there you go. I've got Shelley in first. Wonderful, part of the Romantics. Byron and Keats all died young. I think the oldest of them was 35, and their poetry is beautiful. Love poetry. It's always great to know some love poetry, especially when you've been dumped by one of your lovers. It's always nice to kind of get involved and feel sad for yourself and read a lot of the poetry. So the Romantics are a favourite of mine. But I'm going to talk about a poem that is inspiring. And it's inspiring for two reasons. It really is a lovely poem, but it's the poem that Nelson Mandela learned off by heart when he spent 27 years on Robben's Island. And it's a poem called Invictus. It was by William Ernest Henley, not somebody that you will know. But the idea that man thrown against him, 27 years in solitary confinement, and still emerged, and not only emerged in freedom to lead his country, but I think it's an accepted fact that after being a vote for president of the world, Mandela would have won comfortably. And that is down to solidarity. The solidarity on these docks that I worked on when we were part of the anti-apartheid movement and refused to move South African. Solidarity is so important when working people join hands across seas and oceans and nations. Anything is possible, and that's what poetry and work does. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I've not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strict the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. You
learned that off by heart.
He did.
And would quote it
To himself, he would repeat it over and over to himself to give him strength. And my God, how emotional that makes me feel. What an incredible man! And of course, Mandela was like so many people who have been oppressed by the power of wealth, who seek to destroy the views of ordinary people fighting for fairness. And Mandela was the great example, but so many thousands. And it's another reason why I'm so proud to call Jeremy Corbyn my friend, because here's a man who, I don't know anybody who knows more about international causes and supports the struggles of people throughout the world than Jeremy. And it's because lots of people, even to this day, are suffering what Mandela suffered, but that strength, that spirit, that inner belief that we all have, and that is shared by people around the world, irrespective of colours and creed and language. It's that solidarity that holds good and means so much to us all.
Yeah, and that strength of personality under fire. Do you know that poem yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I think what Ben's just done is brilliant. And you brought Shelley into this before, because my mother loves Shelley, and I have a whole special shelf of books on Shelley. But if you think of Shelley, also think of Coleridge. Also think of Byron. Shelley. Of constituents. And that one time
Really?
I couldn't time. Is actually Coleridge after big time Wordsworth, and when the point comes where the albatross is killed, and he says, "Oh, shrieve me, holy man," because of the dead albatross. The albatross is meant to be the end of Wordsworth's relationship with Coleridge. Now, as Len said, these guys did not believe in short poems. Each one is sort of like 30, 40 pages long each. Now, Byron, Shelley, Byron Shelley and Mary Shelley went on a trip to Geneva and then to Italy. The Great Summer, there's a book called A Summer with L.B. They must have been completely weird because they were all taking lots of substances that are not allowed these days. And they were staying in a house in Geneva where they were thrown out of by the landlord because they were too noisy, enhancing the sound. And Byron wrote a great deal. And Shelley died in Italy, Byron died in Greece. Now, I'm not going to quote any Byron poetry, but there's just one point about Byron's memory, because everybody here would probably think, Lord Byron, poet. Yeah, he was. Of course, he was actually a brilliant poet. But he was also the one person to speak up in support of the people that were breaking the new weaving machines in Nottinghamshire. And he spoke up in the House of Lords in 1812 to oppose the Frame Breaking Act. They were breaking the frames because it was putting a lot of people out of work. And so the frame would employ one person to do the work of maybe 10 or 12 others. So there was massive unemployment and poverty. And so Lord Byron, and his only ever attendance or speech in the House of Lords, I don't think he ever went there again, he just made this incredibly strong thing. And I'll just read a little bit of his speech. It's not poetry, but I'm sure you'll forgive me on this occasion.
We'll have to, Jeremy.
Well, I mean, you put it to the vote if you like. No, we can not tell me vote. And he's describing the frame breakers and the activities of the police and the military and the destruction of life that came as a result. Not a single instance had occurred of the apprehension of any real delinquent actually taken in the fact against whom there existed legal evidence sufficient for conviction. But the police, however, useless, were by no means idle. Several notorious delinquents have been detected, men liable to conviction on the clearest evidence of the capital crime, read this again, the capital crime of poverty. Men who had been nefariously guilty of lawfully begetting several children whom, thanks to the times, they were unable to maintain. Considerable injury has been done. And it goes on about the brutality of the police in being sent to Nottinghamshire in 1812 to arrest, convict, and kill. Capital punishment, hanging, took place of those that stood up against the poverty and against these machines that came in, which made a small number of people very rich and a large number of people very, very poor. You could have written that poem during the miners' strike of 84, 85, when the police and others went into South Yorkshire.
Can I just add one thing about that summer in Geneva that you mentioned, where they all went and took illegal substances and did whatever they did? They all set themselves to write a novel, and Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein.
That's right.
And so she was, in fact, you just missed out that she was, in fact, the great creator
No,
of that summer.
I was coming on to that bit, actually. The point about Mary Shelley, just interrupt you 1 second, was that Mary Shelley was 16 at the time,
Yeah.
had eloped, if you like, with Shelley, and William Godwin wasn't very happy about that. In fact, he was very angry about it for the rest of his life. And she then had these crazy men around her who were arguing the whole time. They did a lot of arguing. And she went off in another room, locked the door, and wrote Frankenstein. And she was absolutely brilliant in every conceivable way. And I think she's always described as Mary Shelley, the lover of Percy Shelley, the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft. No, she was an amazing woman. And that book is, in a sense, science fiction. It's a whole lot of things, but it's absolutely brilliant. So.
Well, and it's endured in a way.
Oh, it's endured more than the other stuff. Actually.
Yeah, well, it's endured in a different way. So just because it's my job to keep an eye on time, and there's questions from the floor, do you want to do one more poem?
Only one?
Well, you can do.
I'm enjoying this so much, I might miss the first half of it. Let's have gone into it versus Liverpool. And by the way, Mary Shelley and Mum Mary Wollstonecraft, if you grab Carrie Murphy later, she might tell you a private little story about both of them that she wouldn't be allowed to tell in public. But
the queue has begun.
Yeah, absolutely. I press on. Obviously, the point that Jeremy's making about poetry is that it evokes every single emotion that you can think of. Every single emotion. It's about everything: love, hatred, anger, despair, and the aspirations and hope that we all have. And of course, throughout history, there have been different parts of how that has played a role in people fighting for a better society. So a number of comrades here tonight from Scotland, and Robbie Burns, their great poet, was the one that gave them the inspiration to constantly fight against the establishment. And my good friend Jim Mallett would be able to quote and sound like Robbie if I gave him the mic, and it's quite moving. But what I quickly wanted to say just about the love of poetry and what poetry can bring, and it goes back to what I was saying before about songs, because Paul Simon, way back in the 60s, wrote a song that is one of the greatest love poems that I've ever heard. It's called Kathy's Song. Yeah. And there's a piece in it that he says, "And so you see, I've come to doubt all that I once held was true. I stand alone without beliefs. The only truth I know is you." Kathy's Song. And if you pull me afterwards, I'll tell you who Kathy was. There might have been a few of them actually, but nevertheless. Can I, if you want me to do a poem, and I'm looking quickly at which one I should do. Obviously, I'm a fan of William Blake as well, because he, to me, is one of the first English revolutionaries. And I mean, if you look into Blake's work, they're very simple, some of the poetry, but really challenging the whole basis of the establishment and the church. And if you get into Blake, it is quite amazing. He wrote Jerusalem, great song, put to music, but a wonderful song seeking for a better life. But I thought I might just read one of his better known ones, which to an extent kind of sums up some of his poetry. It's called The Tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burn the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What hands dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what surface was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp, dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee?
I'm sure we'll have time for another poem, but I'm aware that there's somebody who wants to read a poem in the audience, and I think people, yes, Wally, is that right? Yeah. And then maybe others. And so what we might do is after Jeremy's, oh no, you're now ahead, aren't you? Yeah, okay, do a quick one, and then we'll go.
But very quickly, I just want to bring us into another issue, and that is poverty, is homelessness, are people that are victims of war. And a poem I've come across is written by a man called Wendell McKelvey Brown. He was a US conscripted soldier in Vietnam. He was being chased by the Viet Cong. He hid in somebody's house, and they tried to protect him because they wanted to prevent him being killed. And they unfortunately were killed in protecting him. He didn't want to be in Vietnam. He was a conscripted soldier. He eventually came back to the USA, was devastated and traumatized by this experience. His relationships didn't last very long. His family breakup followed as a result of that. And then he got a job as a painter and decorator, and he had flashbacks of the horrors of what he'd seen and done in Vietnam. And he fell off a ladder and was badly injured. And he didn't get any support and so on as a result of that. And then he turned up in California, and he tried begging and couldn't get any money. So he then advertised that he would write poems for people. And he wrote poems, and the whole community ended up supporting him and his poetry for as long as he lived. And he died when he was nearly 70. And he wrote this poem called Ballad of a Bushman. Some clustered bushes shelter me in loneliness and misery. They shield me from the wind and cold and help keep what hopes I hold. I gave my best for Uncle Sam and came back dead from Vietnam, when afterwards at home again, just one among forgotten men. My world had changed, I was alone, nobody cared, no welcome shown. From eyes of strangers, eyes of friends, my heart was broken, would not mend. Such awful scenes of dead mankind, blood soaked the regions of my mind. For me, the loss of days long gone, leave me no choice but to wander on. What do I seek and do not find? Where is the comfort for my kind? No cheerful hearth awaits me, my days plod on eternally. But wait, I say, don't pity me. I have the mountains and the sea. I've watched the cities sprawl and grow, with people boxes row on row. I've seen men slaving lives away, pursuing money night and day, confined in concrete kennels high, commercial treadmills in the sky. I too need money, that is true. The meagre bits I beg from you. I'm not proud, I have no wealth. I'm thankful just to have my health. My wants are few, but this I've found. What peace is mine comes from the ground. God's friendly bushes are my pad. They gave me what little ease I've had. They know full well I sometimes cry. They know as I that men must die. Before that time I want life, with simple comforts, kids and wife.
Do my professional self. So far, that's just so interesting, and I feel like probably we could all listen to a lot more. But should we break it up a bit with some audience? Wally, do you want to read your poem, and then perhaps questions? People might have questions for Jeremy or Len. Do you want to tell us what you're? Just give us a bit of background.
Hello. Just a local Liverpool lad, just like you, smokers. This poem defines who it's for while I read it, so if it resonates with you, it's for you. If you whistle while you walk, if you're careful while you talk, if you cry when you feel alone, fret not. For you are the plenty, just like the sun, your kind shines down on everyone. And though sometimes envy shines on you, your spirit is strong, your intentions are true. If you dance when you're alone, if you seldom whine or moan, if your kindness knows no bounds, look up. For we are the plenty, just like the trees, we nurture our friends and fallen bees, and while they might joke and snigger and jeer, our spirit is strong, our intentions are clear. We seek not to injure, to slash or destroy, we seek to nurture, we seek to invest in ourselves and the future, in people and things, in gadgets and toys, whatever life brings. We are brothers and sisters who smile as you do, who too long for harmony, who think they are the few, but they are the plenty, and equal they are, but yes, yet they must join from near and from far. So seek out your siblings, for there's much to discuss. This world it is changing, and we can lessen the fuss. The zombies will drain you, and waste you, and squeeze you, and until you are nothing, and they'll do so with ease too. Until you find safety, you'll gasp and you'll wheeze, so till then seek shelter. Seek wisdom and light, and notice your siblings, their orders so bright they'll feed and water you, and you them also, and forever support us, and together we'll go. For we are the plenty, though scattered and light, we cover this planet, now let us unite.
Wow. If I could say, their generation read from books, you read from a phone. That's the way it goes. Anybody want to follow that? Oh, yes. So, I think it's a poem. This is the night about poetry. So, I'm going to take you, and then the gentleman with the white hair. So, yeah. Great. This is my
poem's actually about Grenfell Town. I just want to thank you for support, Jeremy. That I grew up in the area, and a lot of people I know were affected by it. So yeah, just wanted to read it. Sorry, it's a lot of people.
Ignore them.
Lump in my throat for those who lost lives, jumping and suffocating as Tories vicariously thrive. West Londoners will never forget this injustice when the vulnerable were left to their own devices. The building towers over, seen from every window, a constant reminder, no way to gain closure. Refusing to accept blame, the wealthy got nervous. Firefighters blamed for their noble service. The whole world watching as they sat in ivory towers. Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea are the real cowards. 72 innocent lives ignored. Despite this, W11's property market continues to soar. Silent marches to remember this tragedy. Nothing can forget this, not even apathy.
Oh. Yes. I think we're sort of getting a queue of people wanting to read
That's
their
great.
poems, which is just brilliant.
There's no pits in here, is there?
No.
Mine's about activism. I'm an activist for anyone who doesn't know. Oh, Chantal once. I can't put a foot over the line, nor step towards it, not a toe, not a glance. They watch me stumble expectantly, waiting for me to fall. There are no fairy godmothers, no guardian angels or kindly mentors. Ain't no one come to save me. I'm alone. The fight is all I've known. This voice learned to shout over the hand jammed against its throat.
It's stifling. I can't breathe in here. Literally. I wish they'd turn down the incinerator, but I work best with the flames licking against my feet. Fighting for our place in this world, so the people who come after me won't have their backs up against my wall. I can't breathe, but the choice to leave is not a privilege bestowed onto those who look like me. In this skin, I'll never truly fit in. My days are long and my nights are sleepless. They lay waiting, patiently in the background, hoping I'll put a foot wrong. And I do. I drink, I fuck, I smoke, but I don't do coke. This overactive mind needs no more stimulation as it struggles to be defined. I need stillness, a chance to catch my breath and choose the right path. I can't breathe in here. So much choice, each path more perilous than the last and blocked by a kindly faced mentor, a gatekeeper who assures they will let me pass. But first, I must dance to the beat of their drum. I close my eyes and tap my heels together. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There is no place like home. No safe space, no place equipped to contain this nomadic spirit. She may rest, sit still for a beat or take a moment to lay her head. She closes her eyes just for a second, but she yearns to be free, unburdened by society's rules. She runs naked, barefoot through the forest, earth between her toes, sunbeams breaking free of the branches to plant tender kisses on her neck. What a sweet fantasy. I'm dragged back, kicking and screaming, to my urban jungle, head in my hands as their words swim around my mind. She's a men hater, coming to the ends with an LGBT agenda. They'll never understand. I cartwheel over the line. Fuck it. May as well give the people what they asked for. Thank you.
This is great. This is great.
It's really good.
Well, we're great, clever. This is a bit old, this, to be fair, but anyway, I think it's still relevant because I wrote it a long time ago. Liverpool, my Liverpool, they're tearing you apart. They're closing down your factories and ripping out your heart. They take away the elders' jobs and all youngest hope and replace them with apathy, heroin and dope. I'm proud to be a Scouser, and I want you to know why. Those politicians sit down south and watch my city die. At least a quick and sudden death alleviates the pain, but it's been slow and lingering under Thatcher's reign. Thank you.
I can see you knew that off by heart. You had it, but you weren't looking at it. Does anybody else, has anybody got a question?
I have sort of a statement question.
Yes?
I don't know. I'm an actor, I'm an activist. I've been oppressed in the UK for far too long, and more needs to be done. So the words peace and justice have to mean something. Where's the word culture? Because culture changes things. Culture that we have at the moment is heading us down some crazy, crazy path. And I've done certain healing medicines, let's say, and I stand with the Indigenous. No matter how bad it is in the UK, think about those Indigenous people who are experiencing climate change at a level that is their habitat. So we are starting to feel that. And that is the dis-ease in life. And this dis-ease in life has to change. And we have to start talking and having an open dialogue about this country that we live in and the way that it's going. Because I'm a black man, I'm gay, and I'm struggling. So we all need a help up at the moment, I think. We all need some more culture. We all need some peace, and we all need some justice. And thank you for coming today, and thank you for listening.
Jeremy might want to.
Thank you, brother, for what you just said. Culture is absolutely part of our very being, and I get so angry at the sort of being lectured by the wealthy and the powerful and what culture is, and when BP fund a play somewhere and think they've done their bit for culture. Culture is our lives, is our poetry, is our oral history. And it's working class communities that didn't have a written history, only had an oral history, so much of which was lost and is still being lost. And you're quite right, the indigenous communities all around the world are people that are suffering the most from climate change, the most from deforestation, from desertification, from exploitation of the minerals that are in the ground. I was at the weekend at the International Peace Bureau conference on environment and peace, i.e. investing money in supporting people rather than war. And there was a wonderful speaker from Manipur in India, and she made two demands. One was that her people in her native lands, as they're described, be allowed to decide what happens to their native lands and they not be handed over to Rio Tinto Zinc or somebody else. And the second thing she said was the global peace, justice and environment movement has got to be in her communities and her places. It's got to be in the Amazon rainforest. It's got to be in Manipur. It's got to be in Indonesia. And she made a request, which we all agreed to immediately. The next time we gather, and there was 1,000 delegates there, we meet in Manipur to show solidarity with those people. And if I could just say something which is the last lines, and it's very brief, I promise you, Melissa, which shows, I think, some inspiration, and that has got to be the wonderful life and poetry and work of Maya Angelou. And the I'll just read her very famous poem, And Still I Rise. I won't read it all because it's beautiful and long, but I just read the last part of it, which isn't usually quoted. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
Well, comrades, there was also a bet as to which one of us would mention Maya Angelou first, and Shall I Rise? So that's 1-1, Jeremy. Just very quickly, I just want to make a comment, fabulous contribution by our brother here. I want to make a comment about peace and justice, because anybody who thought they were going to keep Jeremy Corbyn quiet, or he was going to go quietly into the night, and I might read that poem in a moment, has been disappointed. Peace and justice. I'm sure that there must be leaflets around. They're all around. Please consider being part of that. This is a growing organisation with people being drawn from all over the world because Jeremy Corbyn's name is attached to it, and it's fantastic and it gives hope everywhere. So I just wanted to put a plug in for peace and justice.
That's fine.
Thanks, Melissa invited me to say something about peace and justice, but I was so involved in answering your question I forgot.
Which is why I jumped in.
So this is the double act that we do all the time. Peace and Justice Project was founded less than a year ago. 50,000 people are subscribers on emails and so on, list to it. And it is a political home for people who want peace, want justice, want environmental sustainability, want a culturally driven society, and want to be able to develop those ideas. We've set ourselves 4 campaigning areas: media ownership and media access, and news values that go with it. And the paper who shall be nameless, who is not welcome in the city, is not welcome in our office either. The other three very key areas of work are on let's green this world, let's green this planet, let's green our lives. But don't make it an opportunity for the rich and the powerful to drive into unemployment those that work in industries that are currently causing polluting problems. Invest in them and their lives. Invest in sustainable technology. Share the technology across the world. A green industrial revolution that will provide the good quality, well-paid, unionized, green jobs of the future. It's an industrial revolution for all of us, not just for the rich and powerful. And the third area is economic justice. Very briefly, I was interviewed by a lot of papers in Barcelona over the weekend, and they said, Mr. Corbyn, describe what's happening in Britain today. I started off by saying, how long have you got? And then I said, look, I'll just give you one sentence, and I think that says it all. In modern Britain today, there are more food banks than there are branches of McDonald's. We need economic justice and solidarity to bring about decent wages, decent conditions, and investment in the future of our young people. Let's create a world fit for the next generation. And the last is all my life. I grew up opposing the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, the Libya War, the Syrian War, and so on. All these wars. For all the trillions and billions that have been spent, and the thousands who've died, and the millions that have been driven into refuge, and the 70 million people that are refugees around the world, what on earth are we doing? Starting a nuclear pact with Australia and the USA to surround China. Let's have conversations, negotiations, diplomatic contact to deal with inequality, injustice, and human rights abuses. But you don't bring about equality, peace, justice, and democracy by dropping bombs from 30,000 feet. You do it by peace, and you do it by negotiation. So international solidarity for peace.
I was thinking when you read from Byron's speech in the House of Lords and said that was poetry, there's something about a good speech which is like poetry. Yeah. But then also when you said that somebody said what's happening in Britain today and you said how long have you got, I thought that would make a great title for a poem. And I meant to ask either of you, have you ever written poetry yourself? And if you have, I'm looking at you then because I'm getting a good vibe from you. I'm wondering whether you want to share the poem that you've written.
Unfortunately, the stuff I wrote many years ago could not be shared in public.
Could it be shared with Maxine Peake? Sorry. No, why couldn't it be shared in public?
Well, it's a bit rude.
Oh, it's a bit rude. Okay. All right. I thought that would make a really good ending to the event, actually.
Can I just quickly say about Jeremy's speech there? I mean, Jeremy, you'd make a great leader of a political party. You know me, I don't like to be controversial, but I'm just thinking justice.
I'm going to do my chair thing. 15 minutes, that's my chair thing. I've got to do two sort of house, what do you call it? Housekeeping rules. So the first is to remind you all that all the funds for tonight are going to, is it football football fan supporting food bank?
Yeah.
Fan supporting, yeah. Has appeared with raffle tickets in, but nobody told me what to do with it. Do we pick three out? Okay, so
Add in the price of a jar of jam.
Jeremy, 4 because we'll auction off one of your jams.
Yeah. There's a jar of blackberry and apple jam, which is, well, the trouble is, the jar of blackberry and apple jam is absolutely brilliant and pristine, but it's sitting in my desk at 86 Durham Road, London N7. Not in my bag here. My failing. So, if you would trust us to send it to you,
right, okay. So we pour
jam tomorrow rather than today.
Where are they? All right, the prices. Okay, so I think
I
you should
can,
pick one. You should pick one. I've never.
I can better what Jeremy's just told you because I've got 6 jars of it.
That's the first one.
We've lost the rum.
Where's the roster? Okay, all right. Should we just do it? Right, Jeremy, pick one out.
This prize is not for the missing bottle of rum.
No, this is for a picture of these two gentlemen. Okay?
Ticket number 410. 410.
410. Who has 410? Come and get your prize.
Come and get your prize.
Come and get your prize. Where are you going to put that?
What's
in
the
your
next
in your kitchen? It's a bit big for a fridge magnet as well.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, comrades, the next is a fabulous prize. It really is. And by the way, not that the publishers know this, but for tonight only, it's on sale at the back for £10. So rush up there and get it soon.
Right. Okay. The lucky owner of ticket 838 gets this copy. 838.
Signed copy by Jeremy Corbyn Len McCluskey.
Okay, but let's let this lady come and get. Do you want to come? Yeah. And then we're going to do the rum, and then should we pause? No, hang on a second. She's coming to get her copy. Is it a signed copy?
It is, but it's not confirmed just yet.
Okay. Okay.
Come on,
Oh, we want you to see you claim your prize. Right. Brilliant.
well, I know.
Okay, so now Len is going to pick a ticket out for the rum.
What's got Len McCluskey's name on it? 655. Thank God it wasn't 666. That would have been 655. Oh,
Hey! I'm going to ask you to do that. Right, now it's
Sam on the way.
Sam, okay?
Come on, Sam.
Oh my goodness.
cool.
Okay, can you get that signed after? Because we've only got 10 minutes. All right, so we can pull again for the rum. 887 for the rum again.
887.
No?
Hey, is it the owner of the hat?
887.
Oh my goodness, he's got a study. Right, and then
By the way, the man who's just won that is a fantastic comrade. He does enormous amount of work on welfare. Take David, stand up and take a hand.
It's not
Are
a
you reading
poem, but Len, when he spoke about poetry in school, when I was 8, 9, we went in after dinner. Yellow Phil, there was a saying that just.
Mike.
Sorry, I'm just finding it.
Yeah, she'll hold the microphone.
Anyway, the quote is from a guy called Dale Carnegie. And basically he said, in a nutshell, if you can't do any good to your fellow human beings, don't do anything at all. But he also said, and Jeremy was saying this in the last comments, is that Carnegie said, the only ways to change people is change yourself. In other words, what you are and what good we all are, that will influence people. And we've got to keep hold of that.
the final raffle draw, can you pull for your, what kind of jam is it?
Blackberry and apple.
Blackberry and apple. Jeremy Corbyn special. What's that? Len's teasing you about your jam. 439.
439.
You have to travel all the way to Islington to get it. It's very exciting. Yay!
We'll sign the job. We'll send it to you. We just need to get an address to send to. That's all.
Okay. All right. So look, I knew when I was asked to chair an event with Len and Jeremy, it was going to be my toughest gig, but I've done quite well so far.
You've done brilliantly. Yeah.
I'm still trying to appear as if I'm the one in charge of this table up here, which I sort of, it's a good imitation of someone in charge. I think we'll just go over 5 minutes. So I think I will ask Jeremy and Len to finish with a poem each. I think that's what we'd like, wouldn't we? And I mean, all your poems have been inspirational, but if you can pick an uber inspirational one, no pressure. Look, he's flicking through. I think that would be a great way to. Yeah, oh, he's already ready, so I can see that. So let's do that. So Jeremy, you look more prepared at this minute. So,
well, it's difficult because there's so many poems that one would love to read. I've only selected 19 tonight, so we've only mentioned about 5 so far. And so I think understanding poetry is something we all aspire to and perhaps never completely achieve. But what poetry does is gives people a sense of where they come from, where they're going to, and what they're doing. And it talks about back home, it talks about childhood, and it talks about so many things. So I'd like to finish with a poem by W.B. Yeats, the Lake Isle of Innisfree. Now, Liverpool is a quintessentially very Irish city, and I think the poem is wonderful as a memory, as a hope, and as a place, and beautifully written. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in a bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and a moon a purple glow, and evening full of linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day. I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shores, while I stand on the roadway, or on the pavement's grey. I hear it in the deep heart's core. What a lovely poem.
Yeah, beautiful poem. I've actually been to his grave just out Sligo, I think it is. Kind of beautiful, quiet moment when I was there. A great poet. Obviously, as Jeremy says, trying to pick poems is difficult, and I was there's a Lebanese poet, if you don't know, Gibran Caleb. If you get a chance, read his brilliant work called The Prophets, and it is quite beautiful. It touches upon a whole range of subjects, and it's well worth reading. I was going to finish with Christina Rossetti's, who was a Victorian woman who battled against the problems that women had back in Victorian time, but her poetry has outlasted all her male contemporaries. It's a poem that I read at my mum's funeral called Remember, but because I know you don't want to see a grown man cry, I'll finish off with this poem by Dylan Thomas, one of my favourites. And of course, in a way, it's a message to my brilliant comrade, Jeremy Corbyn. It's called Do Not Go Gentle into That Great Night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words have fought no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by the green bay, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage against the dying of the light. And you, cares bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into the night, Jeremy. Keep fighting for all of us.
And I love a meeting I don't even have to close. Because he did it, and he did it. But thank you all so much. And I think there's still time for the football.
We are indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
If you've got any constructive comments on tonight's event, please let us have them. And if you think it's worth it, Len and I will go on a roadshow with us around the country.
It was a great. I couldn't connect the Wi-Fi must be that end of the building because it kept dropping out. So I just connected to my phone. That was on 5G, but at least the sound was there. Yeah.